want to get married," Emily told him. According to local folklore, any girl who crawled out of the little cave through a narrow gap between the stones would marry within the year. Anne just tugged the hem of her skirt over her boots and looked on, her eyes wide under her knitted wool tam.
"That doesn't work with children,"
said Branwell impatiently.
"I doubt it works at all. No, that's—"
He hesitated.
"That's not what the dark boy was talking about."
For several seconds the wind whistling between the stones of Pondon Kirk was the only sound.
"In a dream,"
Emily said finally.
"What he said only happens in our stories,"
piped up Anne. The three children, along with their older sister Charlotte, had for the last several years been making up stories about an imaginary country they called Glasstown, and frequently the plots required that one character or another be restored to life after being killed in an earlier adventure. This afternoon's hike had had the flavour of an enacted scene from their stories. It was only now that they were here, under the shadow of this primordial monument, that Emily seriously considered the supposed purpose of their journey. Two of their older sisters, Maria and Elizabeth, had died of tuberculosis 5 years earlier. Maria, who would have been the oldest of them all, at the age of 11. Their mother had died 3 years before that, and their aunt had moved in to help their father with the feeding and clothing and instruction of the children. But it had been Maria who became almost a second mother to the others, inventing games and cooking treats for them when they were sick, and telling them stories when it was time for them all to go to bed. The surviving children had mourned Elizabeth, but it was Maria whose absence they still felt every day. Emily carefully shifted around on the slope to look away from Pondon Kirk, down the wide valley that stretched away for miles between moorland hills streaked with green grass and purple heather. Distance and intervening hills made it impossible to see Haworth Church, of which their father was the perpetual curate, and the adjoining parsonage, where Charlotte was no doubt reading to him from Pilgrim's Progress or Paradise Lost, since he was nearly blind with cataracts. This morning, the three girls had been peeling apples at the parsonage kitchen table when Branwell had come clattering downstairs to tell his sisters that he had dreamt of meeting Maria at Pondon Kirk, and that Emily and Anne must accompany him there directly after their midday dinner. Anne had glanced apprehensively at Charlotte, now the eldest, who had frowned at the heathen fantasy.
"That's an unwholesome place," she had said, "and Maria is a saint with God now."
But Emily and Anne had finished their chores, and Branwell didn't have any to do, and Charlotte had of course known that even young Anne missed Maria as much as she did herself.
"Very well," she had said finally. "You three go and have your game."
And after their noon dinner of boiled beef and turnips and apple pudding, the three children had set off. It was only when they had walked over the first hill that Branwell told his two younger sisters the details of his dream.
"There was a dark little boy," he had said, "younger than you, Anne. He was at Pondon Kirk, and he said we might bring Maria back to life there."
Emily stood up now and brushed off her dress.
"What do we do?"
The children often enacted fanciful plays, though generally in the parsonage parlour, and often got very carried away with the characters and the plots, and Emily was nearly certain that this was another of the same, performed outdoors for once. Certainly she didn't really expect some ritual here to let them see Maria again. She was pretty sure Anne looked at it in the same way. She was undecided about Branwell. He had already resumed climbing toward the foot of the monument, leaning forward to grip firmly seated stones, while his scrabbling boots found purchase against woody clumps of old gorse. He looked back over his shoulder and gave a jerky nod.
"In the dream," he called, "the three of us—"
"You saw us here."
Anne got to her feet.
"Not Charlotte?"